Okay, so welcome to our inaugural Alumni Showcase, in which we will be highlighting a new venture created by our MBA alumni. Today, we will be featuring Marc Wandler and his new venture, Susgrainable, a company that transforms beer waste into premium baked goods. Susgrainable is a great example of a company that is aligned with our school's vision to build a more just, sustainable, and prosperous world through innovation and responsible leadership. We will get a chance to hear from Marc in a minute, but before we do so, here is a look at our agenda for today. So after our land acknowledgement, we'll hear from Marc, followed by a short chat between Marc and myself. We will then open it up for any questions you may have, and that will bring us to the end of our event. We'd also love to hear, of course, where you're joining us from today, so please feel free to let us know in the chat box. And although not all of you may be considering the innovation and entrepreneurship track for the full-time MBA, innovation, creativity, and iterative thinking are all elements that are embedded within the program and applicable to the journey that you would embark on with us. So I would like to acknowledge that UBC's Vancouver Point Great Campus is situated on the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the Musqueam people. I would also like to acknowledge that you are joining us today from many places near and far, and acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of those lands.
Hi, Zah. Sorry to interrupt. The slides aren't showing.
Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. Is everybody good? Can you see my slides now? Perfect, thank you. So I'm just going to continue on. So a few quick introductions. My name is Zana Quetta. I'm one of the managers of admissions and recruitment, focusing on the full-time MBA program. Joining me is my co-lead, Vivian Tran, who also focuses on the full-time MBA, as well as the PMBA. Ivan Ewan, Associate Director of MBA Careers, and Paula Portaro, Manager for the full-time MBA of our student experience. So apologies again for the slide confusion. It is my pleasure, and without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Marc Wandler, CEO and co-founder of Susgrainable, MBA class of 2019. Welcome, Marc. Nice to see you in studio, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Zah.
Yeah, so we're all ears and would love to hear your story as an MBA student and how this company came about. I'll give you slide sharing privileges. You can start now.
Awesome, thanks.
Thank you.
And I can honestly say I would not be here as a CEO of a circular economy company if it wasn't for the MBA. So I'll wait for way too many pictures of me to show up in front of me. There we go. So does everybody, I'm just going to look at the chat. Everybody sees the first slide, 3 pictures of me, flight attendant all the way through to CEO. I'll wait for a couple of yeses. Perfect. Awesome. So thanks for having me. My name is Marc Wandler. I'm the CEO of Susgrainable. However, 5 short years ago, if you asked me if I would have been the CEO of this company, I had no idea about the problem. I had no idea about anything other than I really wanted a career pivot. I became a flight attendant because I wanted to travel. I had done a few other things, which we'll get into shortly here. But truly, I wanted to take a leap forward. And that first leap was actually becoming an MBA student. And that led to the second leap. And the MBA program will transform you. I'll showcase how it transformed me throughout my journey. Over the next 10 minutes, it'll be a little bit of a monologue, and then we'll open it up to a bit of dialogue and then question and answers. So how did I go from flight attendant to MBA student to Susgrainable CEO? Well, it all started out at actually Western. So I went out to the West Coast. I was Calgary born. Went out to do my degree in kinesiology because I really love sports. and they actually had a really good soccer team. So soccer was my first passion. Went there, got my degree, did an extra little victory lap because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was actually debating doing a master's in exercise nutrition. However, right before I decided to go, I actually landed a really good job with Alberta Health Services in 2007, working on a pilot program combating childhood obesity. So that actually allowed me to stay. And because I had sent out a bunch of resumes, I also actually got a job at WestJet. Now that one was more of a fun job. And so you'll learn really quickly about me is that I work hard and play hard all at the same time. So having 2 jobs working 90 hours a week was not something that was like something that I didn't like to do. I actually loved it, but every second weekend I would actually travel somewhere. So it really allowed me to get the travel bug out, find myself. The one thing though, is I actually worked 16 different positions at both these jobs. So I constantly like to learn different things. I knew I was a lifelong learner and I wanted to do something bigger. I always looked at the business side of everything I did. And so since business was something that really like that bug just kept coming back in all my positions, that actually led me to apply to the Sauder School of Business Master's MBA program. And the reason why I actually chose Sauder over anywhere else was actually their focus on sustainability and innovation. I came out here, viewed the campus. That was one thing that WestJet allowed me to do, did a couple of visits. The whole network around this program is one of the biggest benefits of that MBA, and it's really what allowed me to start Susgrainable. Now, of course, you're going to see that I already had the entrepreneur spirit. They said when you come do the full-time program to drop your job, and I actually kept it. So I kept working part-time. I would not recommend it. Definitely start listening to the program leaders early. But hey, this is my journey, and that's what happened. So some of my MBA highlights, fresh student there in the suit. Right next to it was actually the MBA Games out in Ottawa. So we went out. This is us at like 5:30 in the morning. We are the only ones in the lounge. We're prepping for our case study. We shocked the competition. It's a lot of Ontario schools, but we were different and we stood out. So being different, you can stand out. Other highlights was the GIE. Went over to Israel and got to really get ingrained in startup culture there. A lot of the extracurricular activities that are available out here. So I was on the soccer team, as well as the hockey team that we went to Harvard. That was a very cool experience. So there are opportunities beyond just the in-class experience. And lastly, you'll learn, I started a food business because I'm a huge foodie. And so this is just an amazing picture, and the catered events, the food is delicious out here in Vancouver, and Sauder's no exception. They put on a good show. Now, one of the biggest things that came out of this was Susgrainable, and it actually came out and was born out of a tech entrepreneurship class. So that's one of many classes that I could speak very highly about. But this one was a little bit different because it was cross-functional in that the MBA students, you work with master's students from other programs. And I thought that was really cool. And the experience that we did wasn't just in-class learning, but actually we were encouraged to get out there and learn and iterate from the knowledge we were getting from entrepreneurs out in the real world, which I really liked. And you'll see some familiar faces in here. So under that strategy, Stuart Carroll, JB, the marketing guy and operations guy, John, they were all also MBAs from the program. The best thing about this, as I keep growing Susgrainable, is my classmates, university profs, they're always checking in. They're always seeing how they can help. So it is really like, it helped with that community building that you need if you're going to start a business these days. Now, the big problem that came about was actually Stuart's fine. He came from the brewing industry, and that's one of the best parts about this program is the amount of diversity that comes into the program. Everybody's experience, you're going to learn so much from just your classmates itself. But he came from the beer industry here in Vancouver, and he flagged a problem that they were seeing, which is a rise in spent grain. So craft breweries had really taken off in Canada. If you live in Canada and are in any urban environment, you probably have a good craft brewing scene in your town or city. But along with this comes the problem of spent grain, which was a waste a lot, and even bigger in the core cities where farmers couldn't get to it because traditionally it can be used as animal feed. So a lot of this was going to waste. And my experience as an exercise physiologist working closely with dietitians was that this is actually everything that we need in our diets nowadays. The most missing nutrient from our diets in terms of macros is actually fiber. And so with the high dietary fiber content and the high plant-based protein content, I knew that this was like a food solution that needed to be explored more. And that's really what started Susgrainable. So it started out as a class. We actually created food as part of the class. We sampled it out. The very first iterations really like just grinded people's throats because we had to learn. We had to learn through iterations. And this is just an example of our first logo. And you're going to get to see very shortly after how quickly we learned to iterate and how much better our branding got, how much better every aspect of our business actually got. And so the team, after the MBA, Stuart actually rejoined quite early on and is acknowledged as a co-founder as well of Susgrainable. But this is the three people that started at markets very early on in the program. We wanted to make sure that if this was actually going to be something that the market would respond well to it. And so farmers market was the cheapest way that we could get the product out there and see if it would work. And I convinced two friends to join me on this crazy journey. One was Clinton from Alberta. He comes from a farming background as well as worked very highly in government and so understands the regulation side of things. And then Angela worked in the restaurant and industry scene. So she had a good network here in Vancouver. So the three of us set out on this journey together. And that's what we're going to dive into next quickly is Susgrainable health food. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an idea of things you're going to do. You're going to create a lot of slide decks as you go through. You're going to get better at this. You can see this is way better already than the first iterations that we did. But have you ever wondered about the other half of your beer? Like I've already told you, I hadn't until I came to this MBA program. But the magic is that two massive problems can be solved with this one solution. So on the one hand, Canadian craft breweries are creating over 700,000 kilograms a day of this beer waste. That's actually super healthy for us. Now, to give you an idea, that's about 90 dump trucks worth of perfectly good food being trucked off as garbage. And so we figured, how can we change this up? Because on the other side, we actually have Canadians who are consuming less than 50% of their recommended daily fiber intake. So can we solve two big problems with one simple solution? And that simple solution was taking that beer waste and turning it into upcycled barley flour. So giving it new life, a new name, new branding, a great new look. But the biggest thing to me is the impact numbers. So before our solution, only 32% of those grains were used. And after our solution, we're actually utilizing 87% of those grains, which is 172% utilization increase, which to me is incredible. And if we can actually scale this up and bring it to other environments, that's next level. The other thing is it's actually really teaching out this new concept of the circular economy. So the way we do it is we talk about upcycling. It's a relatively new term, not everybody knows about, but it's about taking a product and creating a higher value product out of it. And then if you're not familiar with what these boxes are, that's actually sustainable development goals, which you're going to learn a ton about if you come here at UBC. You're going to dive right into them and you're going to find which one really invigorates you. Now, our revenue model here at Susgrainable is fairly simple. We're actually a product company, so it's pretty easy to understand. And we actually had to be very cautious with how we approach the market because we can only produce a certain amount, being a small team and having to contract out a lot of the work right now. So we actually have to manage our supply. That's why the first phase of this was to actually sell baked goods, higher value products that we were doing most of the work for people. So we started with the baked goods, then moved quickly into baking mixes. Now this was a COVID pivot, which we'll probably talk a little bit more about in the conversation with Zah. But then the next step, this is the step I'm really excited about, is going to be that phase 2. So this is a local microfactory approach. And we'll dive into the next slide because this talks about how we've developed our phases of growth. And this sets an important thing is that you have to have timelines when you're doing this type of stuff because it can quickly become overwhelming very fast, especially dealing with a small team. So the phase 1, we actually just completed. We just launched our brand new brand. I have a couple of the baking mixes along here beside me, which is super exciting. I can't wait to talk a little bit more about that. but I'm constantly looking forward. So the local microfactory approach is actually a different idea in terms of our supply chain. So because this problem isn't unique to Vancouver, we're looking at setting up a robust supply chain of microfactories. Technology has allowed us to not have to build these massive factories to build in these efficiencies. And this will also allow us to build in community. So you can see through the different phases of approach, a little bit about how we're tackling this problem. And for me, phase 4 is the most exciting thing because I really like product education and I like educating markets. It's what I really get up to in the morning. I love answering questions and stuff like that. So hopefully you guys you're coming up with questions as you're seeing me go through this, and I'll be happy to answer them as we go on. This is the traction and opportunity slide. Stuff quickly becomes outdated. So this slide is actually getting a brand new update as we're going to be going and looking to raise money here soon. The MBA is also helping me with doing that. So I'm constantly looking back at the knowledge that I learned in the MBA, but we're actually just about to breach $130,000 in sales. We're actually over 3,000 kilos of beer waste diverted, and we're shooting now with the new packaging to be able to get up to 10,000 by the end of the year. And we've been recognized for several awards. One of the most recent ones was the BC Food and Beverage Sustainability Award. And that was our first year being in business as part of the association. So it was pretty amazing that a small company like us could actually stand toe to toe with companies who were 10, 20 years in the making and really just showcase ourselves as a company for the future, especially in terms of impact and sustainability. The team has grown, and one of the biggest things you'll know is that advisors. So these can come from academia. One of the profs here, Joey Hogue, is one of our advisors, and just because she sits on the key advisor doesn't mean I don't turn to a lot of others. But the one thing that the MBA network here at UBC allowed me to do is build a very strong network of associates throughout the Vancouver market, because they like dealing business with people who have put their education and put impact first. And that's one of the things you'll learn going through the MBA. So before I end off here, my monologue, let's go through some quick tips for entrepreneurs, because I don't believe that I shouldn't be able to add a little bit of value with the journey that I've been through. So one thing that I always talk about is pursue job flexibility over job stability early in your career. I always talk about how I do things accidentally on purpose. I always leave myself until I know truly what my passion is, which I definitely found while here at the Sauder School of Business, is to look into flexibility, try different options. Because as soon as you start building something and building that career that you know you want, it becomes a lot harder to pivot when you start focusing on stability. Challenge yourself. So challenge yourself to learn something new while you're here. Challenge yourself to ask the right questions of me, take advantage of this time during this session to really make sure you're doing the right thing. I think there's no doubt in my mind it was the right thing for me, and I believe it's the right thing for you, but you have to find out what you want to get out of it. And so that's also about knowing your why. Why do you want to come here? Who do you want to get to know? Like I said, ask me questions, turn to the network of the recruiting team. They are absolutely amazing. I worked very closely with them during my journey before coming. And so know your personal brand. That's something you're going to learn a lot here, and they're going to talk about a lot. You're going to learn to build a team. So one of the things I'm learning with Susgrainable and why we need to go out and raise money is because big problems require lots of people. The journey is going to get better as I'm able to rely on other people's experience. And a lot of that experience is probably going to come from people who've gone through this program. Grow through cooperation and partnerships. Even the journey through the MBA, you're going to make so many friends and colleagues here. So you want to lean on them, lean on all the resources you have, but this is actually the way to build back business better. Join an organization based on values. So make sure you know why you're doing things. That's a good way to find your why, is find what values you believe in. And then lastly, like I talked about, is build your own personal brand based on your own values. The more you learn to communicate this, the more you're going to know what you want, but the more it's going to resonate with what other people know of you. And when those two come and align, it makes everything easier. So I learned my personal brand while here at the MBA program. It's fun, curious. If you ask any of the profs, I was the student with my hand up, probably more than anybody they had ever seen. I love empowering the next generation, which is why I often sign up to do these types of things. I learned that I'm pretty creative, took Darren's creativity class, which is a must. And then accountable and transparency. I really believe you can set yourself apart, especially with that accountability piece. And they really hammer that home here at the MBA program too. And so last, before we jump into the dialogue, is I'd love for you to connect with Susgrainable, connect with what we're doing. We've only just begun, but you can follow us on sauder.ubc.ca. You can also reach out if you have any questions. I'm always available. And number one is follow us on Instagram, Every Food Company. That's where you're going to see the most delicious pictures as we release them. And with that, I believe we're ready to head back over to the dialogue.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. That was great. You spoke about just wanted to dig a little deeper into something you mentioned. You spoke about the MBA network and the UBC network supporting you. Wanted to get a little deeper into that. How so?
Yeah, so beyond just like knowledge, they were the first people who started purchasing the product. So the Sauder program actually looked up and bought our product for some catering programs. They were one of our first clients, which was a huge way of supporting. The profs also worked very closely with me, always reaching out if I felt I needed any help or anything like that. If they saw something, they seem to be watching me on LinkedIn and whatnot, because they're always reaching out if they think that there's something they can do in that regards. But if I ever needed to turn anywhere, I know who's an expert in what. And they're always like, I can say that 95% of the time I'm getting an answer from one of them. And so it really takes out, as an entrepreneur, you have roadblocks a ton. And when you can reach out to that network to get rid of those roadblocks, it's priceless.
And in terms of career and professional development, specifically like the Business Career Center, how did they play into your journey, your journey at both with the MBA and with Susgrainable?
Yeah, so I'd say we've been in more contact since the MBA than during the MBA. I was kind of one of those students who I just go out and find answers on my own. And so one of the biggest things was they actually did a very good job of reaching out to me and asking how they could help me. And one of the things I just found is that international students, I just commend them for coming over and doing this program, because they have a lot more barriers than I did. And so the amount that they were able to leverage them. And so I tried to give space for them to be able to utilize that system a little bit more. I felt that because of probably 12 years in business or out there doing a career, I was a little bit older in terms of the full-time MBA program. And so I didn't need to leverage it as much. But since finishing up the program as an alumni, I feel our relationship has even just strengthened, because like I want to help the next generation, and they know I want to help. We're kind of on the same page with the communication piece. And so they know to reach out, and I also know to reach out to them, because I know which skills they have.
And in terms of your journey within the program, what would you tell, there's in terms of prospective students looking at the program from outside, wondering whether they're going to take it and what benefits they're going to get. If I could ask you, if you could look back and think to yourself, what were some of the real core skills that you picked up during the MBA? Things that you needed to improve that you feel that you are now a little bit more capable in doing and achieving?
Yeah, so I think that it just equips you with a tool. Like let's say before the MBA, I had a little tool belt, for example. And so I had a certain amount of tools at my disposal. Coming to the MBA basically allowed me to like up that to an incredibly huge tool chest, and not just a tool chest, but also knowing who in my network knows how to use these tools even better than I do. So for example, I took the entrepreneurship and innovation track, but I have friends who took the finance track. So as I'm going and building out, I know that one, I learned the tool a little bit, but I didn't focus on that tool, and I didn't specialize to learn how to use all the tools in the finance side. So I know that I need to reach out to that other person in finance from my classmate, because you're going to spend 16 months with these people. You're going to grow with them. You're going to go through challenges with them. And so these shared experience allow you to reach out to each other and build that camaraderie. And so not only do you build yourself a tool set that's way bigger and you know which tools you can kind of work out and use, you can also reach out to people who know how to use them better than yourself.
Right. Yeah, I have a question from, I'm not sure who, but it says, any advice on how to develop business acumen for someone with no business background?
Sure, I had no business background coming into the MBA program. I was a kinesiologist as a frontline worker. And you could argue that I learned it through some of my time at WestJet. So I learned a little bit of operations and logistics and got called on, especially at one point. I've probably turned down more positions than I care to mention, because I knew my why when I was working at WestJet, and it was to travel. So it was never really my passion to grow within that sphere. But the one thing I'd say is coming in with no business skills is just be really open to learning, be open to asking for help, and just start with the next step. You'll see it all the time, entrepreneurs saying, just start seeking out that knowledge. If you don't know how to use a tool, ask for help. And if you really know it's for you and know you really want to do that business experience and have a little bit of career experience behind you, because I actually went and talked to a career counselor at the U of C, and I took 2 business classes prior to coming to doing the MBA. And they were just like, oh, you should be doing an MBA. Like, you have too much experience to be going and doing an undergrad again. And then lo and behold, I looked at their MBA program and it was way too oil and gas centric. So I came out to UBC.
Yeah, we get a lot of students who are a little, there's a bit of anxiety in terms of the fact that they don't necessarily have a Bachelor of Commerce degree or have any exposure or academic experience or even professional experience in terms of the business world. So that's a question that comes along quite regularly in terms of not having any business acumen, and how does one navigate this course without that at the very beginning?
So all I can say is to that, you are going to get way more out of the program than others. The biggest thing you can do to get rid of anxiety is share it. So let somebody know you're having that anxiety, and let somebody know who's able to help you with that, because there are going to be people with that commerce background. And so for those classes that rely a little bit more heavily on that, just reach out to them for help. And that's what happens here at UBC. We become very collaborative. My program did, and I know the class after me did the same thing. Like, you leverage that expertise and you're going to get so much more value out of the program. So that's the biggest thing I can say.
Eduardo would like to know if your why changed once you started the program or maybe after completing it.
I don't know if my why changed. So I knew I wanted to come and do the entrepreneurship and innovation program. I knew I wanted to focus on sustainability. I'd say it fast-tracked it. So when I came into the program, I planned on going to corporate, working in the corporate environment for 5 years, and then probably starting a side hustle. But then during the program, I literally could not put this problem and what turned into Susgrainable out of my mind. For the first time ever, I worked 2 careers for almost 10 years side by side. And it's because one wasn't fulfilling enough without the other. And so I just had both. But now I'm actually so focused on the one program. And that's where I said, I really found my why. And I think some of my classmates took a little bit longer to find it and found it after the program. But I came in and really embraced the program and really leveraged it. I actually read a book saying why not to do an MBA before coming to do the MBA. And it talked about the biggest reason to do an MBA is the network. So I knew that if I was coming here, I was going to grab hold of the network. So I got to know alumni, I got to know faculty, I got to know people in the BCC. If there was an event, I was going to it. I barely missed any events. Did my grades suffer a little bit? Maybe a little bit, but I got what I wanted out of the program and I found my why. So.
Excellent. Ryan would like to know when the first dialogue of Susgrainable happened with your classmates, and how did you select individuals that you wanted to work with?
That's actually such a good story. So I was in a different group in tech entrepreneurship, and how that class works is you actually do this like interesting, it's almost like a dating thing where they put you all in a room with the new master's students and you have a conversation and you start talking about different problems. The other masters from the other programs are really specialists in something. And so I would actually ended up pairing up with a different group. And the very first class, almost everybody in my group except for 2 of us is like, oh, I'm thinking of dropping the class because you have the ad drop period. And I was just like, okay, well, this is the type of class. Like this was the one class that even the prof said, don't drop this class because you really mess with the whole system. And we had 3 people who were like, oh my God, I don't think I want to take this class after doing the first class. And I was just like, I heard this problem that the Susgrainable team was working on, or what was to be the Susgrainable team. And I just knew I had to be on that team. Like that's what I wanted. So I kind of like weaseled my way into the Susgrainable group. I actually let the prof know. I went and like did stakeholder engagement. I basically put my P1 and P2 learning to use and orchestrated my way into this team to do it. So it was kind of a fun story, but it's obviously worked out for me.
Excellent. Now, Madhav would like to know, what were your goals going into the MBA? How closely aligned were you to them when you finished the program? Did you want to be an entrepreneur from the start, or did you have other aspirations? I think we talked about this.
Yeah, I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. My parents actually owned a wine and beer making business, funny enough. It's no longer being run, but that was kind of, it always fascinated with me. You could say I started my career at 11 years old because I worked in their store. And I did everything from inventory to selling people beer and winemaking kits at 11 years old. So if you want to know how to sell somebody and learn an experience, it's having an 11-year-old sell you wine and beer. Most of them were asking if it was legal or whatnot, but there's no alcohol in it yet. So yeah, no, I always knew I wanted to work for myself. And even through going through the MBA program, you learn pretty fast if you talk to the right people that building equity in something is more than getting a paycheck. So even if that means starting with a side hustle and you need to go out and get a paycheck, not everybody has the same kind of ability to do things, but yeah, I definitely knew I wanted to be in business for myself at some point.
Mm-hmm. And Felipe would like to know, how did you finance the company? Did UBC serve as a bridge for these goals? And you mentioned that your business is mainly a food manufacturer. Does Susgrainable outsource the transportation for the inputs and outputs?
Yeah, so first question is, we're bootstrapped. So we're all funded internally and friends and family, although that's going to be changing soon. This is kind of what we needed to put together in order to kind of take that next step and go out and get funding. This is what's going to allow us to partner up with retailers and everything like that and really get the product and branding out there. Next part of that question was, do you mind repeating it? I think there's 3 in there, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Does Susgrainable outsource the transportation for the inputs and outputs?
Yeah, so last mile and transportation is a huge topic of conversation right now. I'm a big advocate of doing everything for yourself first. So we've often been the first to deliver our product. One, you're going to find and learn a lot of the bugs that way. You're also going to find out if you like doing it or not. So that gives a good indication of who on the team should do it. But then you got to find who is going to be able to take that off your plate if it's not something that your team is skilled at. So we like having a bit of the knowledge on the back end. My business partner really likes diving into the logistics and analytics of it. So right now we're still doing it in-house and we're evaluating partnerships at the moment.
Okay. And in terms of Susgrainable, would you recommend the innovation? I have Alex, who is a current student here. He's hoping to start on a startup idea during the program. Would you recommend the innovation and entrepreneurship track? Were there any particular classes that specifically helped you prepare to launch Susgrainable? Apart from tech, you mentioned tech entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah, tech entrepreneurship really gives you kind of this iterative approach of changing things. And so that's one of the things it teaches you is not to fall too in love with your product. It's like you want the market to fall in love with your product, not you to fall in love with your product. So it teaches you the lean business canvas, which is super important to know, I think, in today's business. I think one of the things you have to realize if you want to start something out of this is what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? So as you're going through classes, I don't think there's any particular class. I think it's what speaks out to you and what you feel you want to learn as you go through the program. And I don't think I can give that advice without knowing somebody a little bit more. But it's really knowing about what are going to be your strengths and what are going to be your weaknesses. And that will really align with who should you partner up with, because you shouldn't partner up with people with the exact same skill set as you early on in business. As you reach certain stages and you start looking at more of like the scalability side of things, then you do want people potentially taking over your strengths so that you can duplicate yourself. But the biggest thing is everybody's got a different skill set. And so how can you leverage the skill set of somebody else? I think the strongest companies are the ones where you can have 3 people who can really come in alignment. So that's somebody who's very ops focused and loves ops more than anything else. Then it's somebody who's really marketing focused and likes marketing more than anything else. And then there's the finance side and somebody who really likes finance. And if you can have those 3 pillars, which are a lot of the classes kind of revolve around those 3 pillars, those would make the strongest teams. And then my next thing is like, for me, it's make sure your vision is one of impact. And then you'll see great success once you find exactly the thing you want to scale.
Great. Okay. So we've got about 5 minutes left. Another question that just came in, were you exposed to sustainability in all of your classes? I think I know the answer to this. Or was it just focused on your innovation and entrepreneurship? So was sustainability something that sort of permeated throughout the program, or was it just focused in a specific class?
I'd say it permeated throughout the program, but it was in different levels. So some classes, like especially P1 and P2, you're learning a lot of basics. And so it's a little bit lighter. But then after that, it starts becoming embedded a lot more. But when you look at your extracurriculars and the other stuff around the program, it's definitely embedded in that.
Mm-hmm. So anything else you'd like to mention? I mean, we had a conversation earlier in which you said the market, which really, you made a statement that really struck me in saying that the market told you what to do. You had graduated, you were looking for work in the corporate world, and you pivoted to your side hustle. So please explain to us what you meant by listening to the market, being forced to listen to the market and doing so.
Yeah, so I guess there's 2 points where I did this. So one, it was kind of kicking off Susgrainable. We basically decided we were going to go for farmers markets. And so I graduated, or I finished the core part of the program in December, and then markets don't start till April. So I was applying to jobs, doing all that. And funny enough, probably the closest I came to taking a job came about 2 weeks before running Susgrainable. It was a great corporate job. It had a lot of what I wanted out of it, but the one condition they made was that I would have to give up Susgrainable. And so I had already been working on it for 18 months, and just that was like a non-negotiable for me. Even though it was a 6-figure salary, I was like, I can't give this up before even trying. I know I'm going to regret that, because I just believe that this is something that people will respond to. And so within 4 weeks of farmers markets, we learned that that was indeed true. Within probably 8 weeks, we had way too much work for us to handle. We had to hire our first hire, which was a baker, because none of us had baking experience, so that we could expand product line. and focus more on the other stuff that we had gotten good at. And then the next big part of what really tested us was when COVID hit. So I really pushed back on packaging because of a lot of, especially in the consumer mindset, how unsustainable packaging has become. To me, it's how confusing it has really become, but that's a story for another day. So because we pushed back on packaging, when COVID hit, safety became a top priority, and actually everything had to be wrapped. And people weren't going to their cafes anymore. A lot of small businesses were closing down. A lot of our business partners were closing down. We had created a funnel where we had about 14 prospects in it, and we were about to raise our first kind of money from outside investors. And 2 weeks before we were set to close this raise, all this happened. The pandemic hit. And so that's when we actually had to just take a step back and say, do we want to keep doing this? Like, we put in so much effort, but we actually needed money to keep going. And again, the market kind of told us what to do. Within 3 weeks, baking mixes were taking off. Everybody was trying baking at home to deal with the stress. It was a natural progression for us to move into consumer packaged goods 2 or 3 years down the road. We basically were just being told we had to fast track it, and a lot of government money became available. So we just had to change up our approach. And so that's what we did. There were no jobs to be found immediately when COVID hit, so I wasn't looking for a job. And then when the jobs started coming, the traction started coming back with our product again. And so when it comes to upcycling and the product we were doing, we're focused on the long term over the short term. And we're focused on finding aligned partners and aligned impact capital. And I got to speak to, if nobody knows, the founder of Outcast Foods. He's probably the leader in the space right now. Good thing is he's started a company before doing this, so he's got a little bit of an advantage over the rest of us. But the number one thing he said when you're looking at early stage capital is if they're not concerned about the impact of what you're doing and they go straight to the finances, that's not your first investor. So that was super, super impactful. I think I'll leave it at that. I think I took a long time to answer that question, but hopefully I answered it.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, we're just going to wrap it up here, everybody. Just a final notice in terms of our upcoming deadline for domestic students. Our final deadline is on the 4th of May. I'll just share my screen here so you can take a look. All right, excuse me while I scroll through here. Our final deadline is on May 4th, with our document deadline being on June 30th. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or the team, and we'd be happy to assist you in that regard. I just wanted to thank Marc very much for your time, taking the time to talk to us and telling us about Susgrainable. Please check out his website. And I want to thank everybody for taking the time today, joining us in our inaugural Alumni Showcase. Thank you very much. We look forward to hearing from you. And thanks again, Marc.
Yeah, thank you. I always like being the first doing things, so.
Excellent. Thank you.